All right, the invoice customization is where you get to customize pretty much everything about the way your invoice looks, some of the global options. So let's just dive in. First, we want to upload two different types of logos. We want to have a default logo and a light version of the logo. Let me show you why. First, I'm going to upload my default logo and I'm going to drop in a white version. So if I go to my invoice and refresh, I'm going to have my default version logo right here. But if I go to the customer dashboard, the one they get a link to, my white logo is going to be right here. So anything that has a darker color, we're going to use the white logo. Anything that has a lighter color, we're going to use our regular logo. So now it's time to select a template. On the left-hand side, your invoice template is the one you have selected, and this is the default. Now I can also open the library and select from a bunch of awesome and custom design templates. In this case, I'll select this one. And now you have this as your default template. Next, we'll select the color of the default template. Now I can customize this default template color, but please note that not all of these invoice templates are going to be customizable in color. So for example, if I change that to yellow, so there's only certain invoice templates that are going to have full color customization. However, any color change you decide to make here is going to reflect. So if I make this orange, save, I'm going to go back into how my customer sees this and refresh, and it's going to be that orange. So this is more like branding colors. You can definitely take some of the invoices that are color customizable and run it with that. But most of the time, people are just going to run with the design they like. Next, moving on to invoice options. So invoice start number is super important. Typically, if you're in business or creating your first invoice, I would not put in the number 1. So let's put in 2222, and then on estimate options. Now this will ensure that our next invoice is 2223, and it will go from that point on. It's good practice not to change this invoice number after you've selected it, because you're going to have a lapse in invoicing numbers and repetition. So if you've already selected an invoice number, just stick with it, or change it once or maybe twice, but not too many times, because it can get a little confusing. Next, let's move on in estimate options. Here we have the ability to, after we send an invoice, and if a customer accepts it, it's automatically going to generate an invoice as soon as the customer accepts it, as well as invoice languages. So we can change the estimate title by going to invoice languages, as well as the invoice title. So if we click on here, it'll open up these settings. We'll touch on that in a future video. And last but not least in this section are the recurring invoice options. So we can set recurring profile payment due, and we'll keep it on 15 days. But this will pretty much set how many days in the future you want your customers to pay that recurring invoice. So if that number is a week after issuance, put it 7 days. Typically, you're going to have either 15 days or 2 weeks or 30 days. Because naturally, the bigger this number is, the longer it's going to take you to get paid. We prefer to have it upon receipt. That is ideal. So let's move on to global options for invoices and estimates. I like to put on adding the invoice estimate as an attachment in every email that we send. You can also send a copy of the invoice or estimate to your own email when they are sent to the customer. This is helpful in case you're creating recurring profiles. So if the recurring profile creates a new invoice at a certain time, you're going to get a notification with that specific invoice that was sent to the customer. Now check this out. Hide the following in invoice and estimate. So if we look at this right here, and maybe we don't need to have United States, or maybe we don't need to have our whole address. We can just go in here and say, hey, I want to hide my country and hide the address and maybe hide the phone. And I want to hide the bill and 2 labels on that specific invoice. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Refresh this. Now it's trimmed this quite a bit. Or if I look at it from the customer side, refresh, boom, that's been trimmed as well. Next, we have the format options. This is pretty self-explanatory, how you want your default date to look like. So we'll keep it like this for now. Default currency, we have US dollar selected. Now, warning, having different currencies on invoices will create issues on your profit and loss statements and reporting. So that means if you're typically invoicing US dollars and then you do euros, there might be a currency exchange deficit there. It can create a little bit of confusion at quarterly, monthly, or annual level when it comes to reporting. Now, item decimal points, as you know, different countries work with different decimal points, you have the ability to do that right here. And let's move to notes and terms. This is going to be default for every single invoice. So whatever payment terms you put in here or default notes to customers, it's going to show up on every single invoice. If you go into customers and if you plug in a custom note to that specific customer under edit right here, this note will override this note you have here. So there's a little bit of extra customization for you. Any questions or ideas? Let us know.